Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I'm going to share with you guys the ultimate tips on memorizing the Quran. If you haven't watched the first video where I share tips before memorizing the Quran, then you can click the link here now or later. But today specifically we're going to talk about how to memorize the Quran. These tips I have followed myself throughout the entire duration of my own Hifz course, and so I find them very useful and practical. So if you're ready, let's get to it. Tip number one, and this is very common sense and you will hear this a lot, is to use the same print, same version that's from the same publication. This is a famous 15-line Hifz Quran. It's famous because it has 20 pages on every juz. They start from the beginning of a verse and they finish in the end of a verse. So it's very practical, it's very reasonable, it makes sense for people to use this mushaf to memorize. Because you need to have a photographic memory or a map of where you're reading. Now if you keep on switching the mushaf from one print to another print, you're going to lose, or you're not going to have a map of what you're memorizing. Tip number two is record your progress, whether it's on a card, whether it's in a pamphlet, whether it's in a book. Record it. Whatever you give to your teacher that specific day, the sabak you give, the previous lessons you give, the current juz you give, record all of that. Record the amount of mistakes you make, the amount of time you got stuck and your teacher had to tell you. Record all of that stuff so you can see your progress, you can see how you're performing, and that will motivate you and push you to do better and better. Tip number three is to find best time and place. Now the best time can be whenever your mind is fresh. It could be after Fajr or after lunch or afternoon, wherever it is that you think you are rejuvenated and you are fresh. Now our teachers usually tell us to memorize after Maghrib, and the reason is because after a whole long day, maybe in the afternoon you have some recess, you go and play some sports, or maybe you take a nap, and then after Maghrib you are kind of refreshed, you have some newfound energy, rejuvenated, and so this time would be a good time to start memorizing. Your mind is fresh. And now another thing is that in order for you to make sure that something was stored in your permanent memory, you need to be able to recall it after some time. Now if you memorize it in the morning and you give it to your teacher an hour later, it's still fresh and you haven't given some time for your brain to absorb that. When you have something memorized fresh and you give it, you're not that confident with it. Opposed to something you memorized yesterday and you're giving it the next day, you spent some time on it, you slept on it, you woke up and you revised it on a different day. It just has a different level of retaining. As for the best place, again, it can be the masjid. It doesn't have to be the masjid. It can be your own house, it can be your living room, it can be your bedroom. But the most important thing is that there's no distraction in that place and there's some air flowing. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. You're comfortable there, you feel at home there. Make sure your video games, your TVs, your phones, your siblings, everybody stays away at that time in that place. Try to start your memorization every day at the same time, so everyone in the house knows that, okay, my brother or my son or my daughter, they're going to start memorizing now. He's going to get in his zone, he's going to do his thing now. We cannot and should not bother him or her. And at that time, that 1 hour window you have or 2 hour window you have to go beast mode. You have to give it your all and memorize to the best of your ability. Tip number four is get right to the memorization. So now you've found the time and the place and now you're about to memorize. How should you memorize? Should you start marking it? Should you start writing it? You know, in some countries, they write them down on tablets. It works for them, but we don't have that facility, and most of us, we don't have that ability to write that well. So don't waste time writing on a paper or highlighting or marking stuff. Get right to the memorization. Alright, tip number five, the memorization method. Different people have different memorization method as to how they memorize, but this is the tip my father gave me, who's also a Hafiz. He told me this tip before I started memorizing. He said that when you start to memorize, so you're going to read the first verse, for example, وَهُدُوا إِلَى الطَّيِّبِ مِنَ الْقَوْلِ وَهُدُوا إِلَى صِرَاطِ الْحَمِيدِ. You start memorizing this, repeat it however many times you need to repeat it, memorize it. Once it's stored in your memory, then go to the next verse. Memorize the next verse and then come back to the first verse and then read both both of the verses together. After that, go to the third verse. When you're done with the third verse, then go back to the first verse and read all three together. Just like that until you come to all the way at the end of the page. So when you come to the end of the page, you should be able to read the whole page from your memory. Whatever method you like, stick to that one method. And over time, your brain will get used to it. And you will be able to optimize that one specific method that you are comfortable with. All right, tip number 6, and this is a very, very important one, is after you've memorized it, before you give it to your teacher, read it to as many classmates and friends that you can. Read it to one person. If you have a mistake, mark it down, go back and fix it. You have to fix it before you give it to your teacher, because once you memorize it like that and nobody catches it, maybe in your lifetime you'll never know, and you will, even if you know, it will be difficult to fix it once you memorize it like that. So before you register it in your brain and you're ready to give it to your teacher, read it to as many people as you can, because we don't want a single mistake, no matter how small the mistake is. We don't want to add a haraka, move a haraka, add a letter, add a mud, nothing like that. Some might say, oh, it's just a haraka or just a mud. No. Everything is part of the Quran, is the speech of Allah. We cannot add or delete or omit anything, even if it's a haraka. This is a personal story of mine where I was reading to one of my friends before I was giving to the teacher. I was reading batil with a lam, and I was calling Allah batil wal-iyadhu billah. At that time, we didn't even know the meanings or anything, but it was such a huge mistake. To this day, I still remember that friend, and I thank Allah that I was able to read to him and he caught that mistake. So it's very important that you read to someone or several people before you give it to the teacher. Alright, tip number 7, maintenance. You have memorized the juz. Every single day you should be reading that juz to your teacher, the juz that you're memorizing. After you're done with that, then you have to give one juz from your previous memorization that you have done. Every day you do one juz, you read it to your teacher. So in the beginning you can read one juz from your previous memorization, and then as your memorization bank grows, you should be adding to that juz and a half. In the end, you should be giving 2 juz every single day to your teacher, and you shouldn't have too many mistakes in those. Maybe max 2 mistakes as in your teacher has to tell you. That's a mistake. You should only give yourself 2 chances like that. If you have more than that, then you have to repeat the juz, and after you're done with the juz, you should give a test on that juz to a teacher or someone who is very strict, who will test you from beginning to end of that juz. Make that juz very, very strong. Alright, tip number 8 is mutashabihat. Know your mutashabihat well. And hufadh, you know there are so many similar verses in the Quran. If you're not focused, if you don't know where you're reading, if you don't follow along where you are, you can easily drift off. So my teacher used to tell me that imagine these mutashabihat as like you're driving on the highway. In England, I think you guys call it motorway or something. Motorway, I don't know what you guys call it. But anyways, think like you are driving on a highway or a motorway. And then when you see an exit, you have to be very careful that you take the right exit. You don't take the wrong exit, because then you'll end up somewhere else, or you have to come around and waste your time. So just like that, when you're reading mutashabiyat, for example, وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَىٰ طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ فَلَيْسَ لَهُ الْيَوْمَ هَاهُنَا حَمِيمٌ is one exit. The other exit is وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَىٰ طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ. So you got to be careful you don't take the wrong exit. The way we used to make sure that we know our mutashabihat well, we used to write them down in our Quran. Tip number 9. So let's say you followed all of these tips and you memorized the Quran well. Now once you're done with memorizing the Quran, there's something called Dawr of the Quran, where you sit back for 5-6 months, even 1 year, depending on how old you are and how much time you have. And that whole year or that whole 6 months, you should be repeating the Quran as much as possible. Every single day, give 2 to 3 juz to your teacher. Alright, tip number 10 and the last tip is show love and affection and respect and honor your teachers, because they put so much work behind you. Teachers, after a while, they also build a love and affection for you. And the teacher's not going to show it, but once you're done and you're leaving, it's like as if they're letting go of their own child. So love them, always stay connected to them, always call them. If you see them, respect them, honor them to the best of your ability. And of course, love and honor and respect and obey your parents, because they are the one that are making the sacrifice for you. They are the one that perhaps guided you to this path, and they're the one who's going to support you in your tough times and in your good times. All right, guys, these are the tips that I had. I hope you found them beneficial. I hope I didn't miss out anything. If you think I missed out something, then write it in the comment section below so other people can see it. If you have any suggestions for me to make new videos on, you can write that in the comment section as well. And of course, your likes and your subscriptions, they all mean so much to me. I always appreciate any feedbacks you guys give me. I want to improve this and I want to make this better. Until next time, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.